My credit card declined at the grocery store. I stood at the register with a cart full of ordinary things, milk, bread, coffee, while the cashier ran it again. Declined. Again. My face burned as people in line behind me shifted impatiently. I pulled out another card, also declined. "I'm sorry," I mumbled, abandoning the cart and walking quickly to my car. My hands shook as I logged into our joint account on my phone. The balance made me gasp out loud. Nearly $50,000 gone. I scrolled through recent transactions with growing horror. Jewelry purchases. Hotel stays in cities we'd never visited together. A boutique called Luxe and Lace that I'd never heard of. Then I saw the name on multiple receipts, Melanie's Luxury Goods, the same name my husband had mentioned casually over dinner last week. "Just helping a colleague with her startup," he'd said. I sat in that parking lot for 30 minutes, staring at my phone, watching my entire world reshape itself. When I finally drove home, I found him in his study, feet up on the desk, smirking at his phone. "The card declined," I said quietly. He didn't even look up. "It's an investment, Tess. You wouldn't understand business decisions." My silence in that moment became his first mistake, because while he assumed my quiet meant defeat, I was already calculating, already planning, already deciding that if he wanted to play games with our money, I'd learn to play better. The argument that night started calmly. I stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, trying to keep my voice steady. $50,000, Marcus. You spent $50,000 without telling me." He rolled his eyes. Pouring himself whiskey like this was a minor inconvenience. "You need to relax about money, Tess. I told you it's an investment. Some of us think bigger than grocery bills." The condescension in his voice was nothing new, but tonight it hit differently. An investment in what exactly? "Hotels and jewelry. Business expenses," he snapped. "Networking, building relationships, things you wouldn't understand." He stepped closer, and that's when I saw it. Lipstick, bright red, smeared on his collar, carelessly hidden by his tie. My breath caught, but I didn't say anything. Didn't accuse or scream or cry. Instead, I pulled out my phone, pretending to check messages, and snapped a photo. Quick, quiet, proof. "You're being paranoid," Marcus continued, oblivious. "Always so suspicious, so small-minded. Maybe if you had more ambition, you'd understand why successful people invest in opportunities." I nodded slowly, letting him think I was backing down. "You're right, I don't understand." His smile was smug, victorious. "Finally, now can we move past this?" "Sure," I said softly. "We can move past it." But as I walked upstairs to our bedroom, I wasn't moving past anything. I was moving forward, toward evidence, toward clarity. Toward the kind of understanding Marcus would eventually regret teaching me. That night, while Marcus slept soundly beside me, I couldn't close my eyes. My mind raced with images of lipstick stains and hotel receipts. At 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went downstairs to his study. He'd left his tablet on the desk, still synced to his phone. I knew his password. Had known it for years, our wedding anniversary, which apparently meant more to me than to him. I opened his messages and started scrolling. My heart pounded as I read conversation after conversation with someone named Melanie. "Can't wait to see you tonight. The necklace is perfect, just like you. You're the only one who understands me." I felt physically sick, but I kept reading. Melanie worked for a small luxury goods company, the same one I'd seen on our bank statements. She'd been sending him photos of inventory, asking his opinion on products, thanking him for his generous support. The realization hit me like cold water. He wasn't just having an affair. He was funding it with our savings, making himself look successful and generous by spending money we'd both earned and saved. I took screenshots of everything, methodically saving each conversation to a cloud drive he didn't know about. As I worked, something inside me shifted. The hurt was still there, sharp and real. But beneath it, something colder and more focused was taking shape. I whispered to the empty room, testing the words. "If she's his prize, I'll make her paycheck mine." A week later, Marcus announced he needed to drain our emergency fund for a business trip. $15,000, our safety net, gone in a single transfer. "Where are you going?" I asked, keeping my voice light and supportive. "California. Meetings with potential investors. Could be big for us, Tess, for our future." Our future. The lie tasted bitter in the air between us, but I smiled and nodded. "That sounds exciting. Do you need help packing?" His surprise was obvious. He'd expected a fight, maybe tears. My cooperation made him careless. "That would be great," he said, actually hugging me. "I knew you'd come around." While helping him pack, I used the opportunity to access his laptop. He'd left it open on the bed, documents scattered across the screen. I copied files to my flash drive, working quickly while he was in the shower. Tax returns, investment statements, business proposals. One document made my blood run cold. Joint tax returns from the last 2 years, filed jointly, but with signatures I'd never seen before. My signature forged. He'd claimed deductions for business expenses that I knew nothing about, expenses that were probably hotels and gifts for Melanie. I stared at those forged signatures, feeling something break and rebuild inside me simultaneously. This wasn't just infidelity anymore. This was fraud. And fraud had consequences that went beyond divorce court. All packed. Marcus called cheerfully from the bathroom. "Thanks for being so understanding, babe. I'll make this up to you." I closed the laptop, slipped the flash drive into my pocket, and smiled. "I know you will." After Marcus left for his business trip, I sat in my car outside my office building and cried. Not delicate tears, but ugly, gasping sobs that shook my whole body. The weight of humiliation crushed down on me. How long had he been doing this? How many people knew? Had I been the clueless wife everyone pitied? My reflection in the rearview mirror showed a woman I barely recognized. Red eyes, messy hair, mascara running down my cheeks. I looked broken, defeated, small. For 10 minutes, I let myself fall apart completely. Then I pulled a tissue from the glove box and wiped my face. I fixed my makeup as best I could. I straightened my blouse and took 3 deep breaths. The woman in the mirror looked back at me with different eyes now. Still hurt, yes, still angry. But underneath all that pain, something harder was forming. "You want power," I whispered to my reflection. "Then earn it back." I started the car and drove not to work, but to the public library. I needed to research, to learn, to understand exactly how business investments worked, what rights I had to our joint assets, and most importantly, what legal exposure Marcus had created with those forged signatures. By the time I left the library 3 hours later, I had pages of notes and a growing sense that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as powerless as Marcus thought. The woman who'd cried in her car was still there, but she was getting angrier. And anger, properly channeled, was fuel. I made an appointment with our family accountant under the pretense of updating our life insurance. Howard had managed our finances for 5 years and trusted me completely. "Tess, good to see you," he said warmly, gesturing to a chair. "What brings you in?" "Just being responsible," I replied, placing a folder on his desk. "Marcus travels so much for work now. I wanted to make sure everything's in order if anything happened." Howard nodded approvingly. "Smart thinking. Let me pull up your accounts." As he typed, I watched his expression shift from pleasant to confused to concerned. "Tess, when did you refinance the house?" My stomach dropped. "Excuse me. Your home, it shows here that Marcus refinanced it 3 months ago, took out a significant amount of equity. I assumed you both agreed to it." I felt like I'd been punched. Our house. The house we'd bought together that I'd poured myself into decorating and maintaining. "How much?" I asked, my voice barely steady. Howard checked his screen. $200,000. The loan is in both your names, but only Marcus's signature is on the paperwork. My hands gripped the armrests of my chair. "Is that legal? If you're both on the title, technically he needs your consent, but if he forged your signature..." Howard trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "Tess, if you didn't authorize this..." "I'll handle it," I interrupted, standing up. "Thank you, Howard. This has been very informative." I walked out of his office in a daze. My house. He'd borrowed against my house to fund his affair with Melanie. His mistress was costing me my mortgage, and probably my home. That night, I copied every single financial document I could find onto a flash drive. Bank statements, investment portfolios, tax returns, credit card bills. Each file I saved felt like reclaiming a piece of my dignity, taking back control that Marcus had stolen. I organized everything into folders. Joint accounts, property, suspicious transactions, evidence of fraud. My hands were steady now, my mind clear and focused. The crying woman from the parking lot felt like someone else entirely. Around midnight, I reached the bottom of Marcus's file cabinet and found a folder I'd never seen before. Inside was a business proposal for Melanie's luxury goods with projected investments, market analysis, and growth potential. Marcus's notes were scrawled in the margins. High risk but worth it for the ROI, and for M, at the bottom of the proposal was a list of potential investors with dollar amounts next to each name. The largest investor, marked with a star, was MW Holdings, Marcus Winters Holdings, a company I'd never heard of, funded with money I'd never agreed to invest. The final document in the folder was a memo listing Melanie's company as a potential investment opportunity with personal guarantees. I photographed every page, making sure the images were clear and legible. Then I carefully put everything back exactly as I'd found it. Marcus couldn't know I was onto him. Not yet. As I uploaded the photos to my secure cloud storage, I felt something that might have been the beginning of a smile. Marcus hosted a dinner party 2 weeks later, inviting colleagues and clients to our home. I cooked, served, and played the perfect hostess while he held court in our dining room. Halfway through dinner, he started talking about exciting new investment opportunities in luxury goods. "There's this brilliant young entrepreneur," he said, his voice full of enthusiasm. "Melanie Santos. She's revolutionizing the boutique market with curated high-end products. I've been fortunate enough to support her venture." I smiled and refilled wine glasses, memorizing every word. Our guests asked polite questions about the business model, the market potential, the risks. Marcus answered confidently, painting himself as a savvy investor and mentor. "It's about believing in people," he said, looking around the table like a philanthropist, "seeing potential and having the courage to invest in it." One of his colleagues, a woman named Patricia, leaned forward with interest. "That sounds fascinating." "Is the company still seeking funding? I might be interested." Marcus hesitated slightly. "They're in a growth phase, selective about new investors." Patricia's husband chimed in then, his voice casual but pointed. "I heard they're actually struggling. My sister-in-law knows the owner, said they're desperate for capital to stay afloat." The table went quiet for a beat. Marcus's jaw tightened. Every startup faces challenges. That's the nature of entrepreneurship. But I'd seen his expression falter, seen the truth in that moment of vulnerability. Melanie's company was failing, and Marcus was pouring our money into a sinking ship. I couldn't sleep that night. After Marcus passed out from too much wine at his own dinner party, I sat at my laptop researching everything I could find about Melanie's luxury goods. Their website looked professional but outdated. Social media showed sporadic posts with minimal engagement. Customer reviews were mixed, with several complaints about delayed orders and poor customer service. I found their business registration, their tax records, even their lease agreement for their small retail space downtown. The company was barely afloat, behind on payments, struggling with inventory, losing money every quarter. They'd applied for small business loans from 3 different banks in the last 6 months, all denied. Marcus had invested over $70,000 of our money into a failing business run by his mistress. He'd mortgaged our house to keep her company alive. My research led me to financial forums and startup blogs. I learned about investment structures, about equity and controlling shares, about hostile takeovers and silent partnerships. I learned that desperate companies would accept money from almost anyone if the terms were right. By 3 a.m., I had a plan forming. Crazy, risky, but possible. I stared at Melanie's company website, at their Seeking Investors page that had probably gone unnoticed for months, and felt that cold certainty settle in my chest again. I whispered to the empty room, barely believing the words coming out of my mouth. Perfect. The divorce attorney's office smelled like leather and old books. I'd made the appointment under my maiden name, paying cash for the consultation so it wouldn't show up on our bank statements. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine, listened to my story without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, studying me carefully. "You have an excellent case," she said. "The forged signatures alone give you significant leverage. Add in the affair and the financial misconduct, and you're looking at a very favorable settlement." "How long would the process take?" I asked. Catherine considered. "Contested divorces can drag on for a year or more if he fights it. But with your evidence, he might settle quickly to avoid criminal charges for the forgery." I thought about Melanie's struggling company, about Marcus's arrogance, about the life I'd carefully built that he'd destroyed without a second thought. "What if I wanted to wait?" I asked. "To build an even stronger case before filing." Catherine raised an eyebrow. "That's unusual but not unheard of. What are you thinking?" I explained my plan in broad strokes, leaving out the more detailed revenge I was planning. Catherine was silent for a long moment. "That's risky," she finally said. "But if you can pull it off, you'd have complete financial protection and significant leverage." She slid a business card across her desk. "My advice, be patient, build your case, document everything. When you're ready to move, move decisively." I took the card, feeling like I'd just enlisted an ally in a war Marcus didn't even know was being declared. I will, I promised. When I'm done, he won't see any of it coming. Marcus came home from his business trip tan and relaxed. He brought me flowers and chocolates like guilty gifts could erase everything he'd done. Then over dinner, he dropped his next demand. Tess, I've been thinking you should quit your job. I set down my fork carefully. Why would I do that? To focus on us, on our marriage. You're always so stressed from work and it's affecting our relationship. If you stayed home, we could reconnect. Control disguised as care. I recognized it now for what it was. If I quit my job, I'd be completely financially dependent on him. Trapped. I don't know, I said slowly, pretending to consider. My job is important to me. More important than our marriage? His voice had that edge I'd learned to recognize. Disappointment mixed with manipulation. I looked at him across the table, this man I'd loved for 8 years, and felt nothing but cold calculation. He wanted me powerless, stuck, with no way to support myself when he eventually left me for Melanie. What he didn't understand was that by trying to trap me, he was actually freeing me. You're right, I said, watching his face light up with surprise and victory. I've been putting work before us. Maybe it is time to focus on our marriage. His relief was obvious. Really? You'll do it? I smiled, the same smile I'd perfected over weeks of planning. Of course, we're a team, aren't we? And if you think this is best for us, I trust you. As I cleared the dishes, I thought about the irony. Marcus believed he was boxing me in. What he didn't realize was that I was already planning to use his money, our money, to finance my own freedom. Playing the role of the devoted wife trying to heal her marriage was exhausting. I quit my job with proper notice, assuring my boss it was for personal reasons. My colleagues threw me a farewell party where everyone wished me luck, focusing on family. If they only knew. At home, I cooked elaborate dinners and asked Marcus about his day with genuine-seeming interest. I smiled when he talked about work and nodded when he complained about business challenges. He thought I'd become the perfect wife. What he didn't see was the new bank account I'd opened at a different bank under my maiden name, or the small transfers I made every few days from our joint account, amounts small enough that he'd never notice. $50 here, $100 there, money that I carefully documented as household expenses in our shared budget spreadsheet. Over 6 weeks, I moved $8,000 into my private account. It wasn't much compared to what he'd stolen, but it was mine. Protected. Hidden. I also filed incorporation papers for a holding company under my maiden name, Tess Morrison Holdings. It cost $500 and 2 hours at the county clerk's office, but suddenly I had a legal entity that existed completely separate from Marcus. A business that could make investments, that could buy things, that could own property. At night, while Marcus slept, I researched business law and corporate structures. I learned about majority shareholders and controlling interest. I studied hostile takeovers and friendly acquisitions. Every piece of knowledge was armor, every strategy a weapon I was carefully adding to my arsenal. My friend Helena worked in corporate finance. We'd been close in college but had drifted apart over the years. I called her for lunch, using money from my secret account, claiming I wanted to reconnect. Over salads downtown, we caught up on our lives. Then I steered the conversation to her work. What do you do exactly? I asked. Venture capital, she explained. We evaluate startups and small businesses, decide if they're worth investing in. High risk, high reward. I mentioned Melanie's luxury goods casually, like I'd just heard about it somewhere. Any good? Helena pulled out her phone and did a quick search. Her expression told me everything. Struggling, they had some early buzz but couldn't capitalize on it. Poor management, cash flow problems, inventory issues. They're probably 6 months from bankruptcy without a serious capital infusion. Would anyone invest? I asked. She shrugged. Desperate businesses attract desperate investors. Sometimes you can get controlling shares for cheap if you're willing to take the risk, but it would take serious money to turn that company around. I nodded thoughtfully, pretending casual interest while my mind raced. What if someone wanted to invest anonymously, through a holding company or something? Helena looked at me curiously. That's common in business. Silent partners, LLC structures, that sort of thing. Why? Just curious, I said lightly. I've been thinking about learning more about business now that I'm not working. That night, I prepared my investment proposal. Tess Morrison Holdings would offer Melanie's luxury goods a lifeline, and in exchange, I would own the company that my husband had bled our savings to support. The irony was delicious. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror the morning I planned to submit the investment proposal. The woman looking back at me was different from the one who'd cried in a parking lot 2 months ago. My eyes were harder now, more focused. I'd lost weight from stress but held myself differently, straighter, stronger, like I'd found a spine I didn't know I had. Once heartbroken wife. I whispered to my reflection, now strategist. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Late meeting tonight, don't wait up. Code 4, I'll be with Melanie. I texted back, no problem, love you. Code 4, I'm 3 steps ahead of you. I dressed in my most professional outfit, a navy blazer and cream blouse I'd bought with money from my secret account. Then I drove to Helena's office building and submitted my anonymous investment proposal through her firm. They would present it to Melanie's luxury goods as coming from a silent investor interested in the boutique luxury market. The terms were generous enough to be attractive, but structured to give me 51% controlling shares. Majority ownership in exchange for the capital injection that would save the company from bankruptcy. Helena had helped me structure everything, thinking I was just practicing business skills. She had no idea I was buying control of my husband's mistress's company. As I submitted the paperwork, I felt a surge of something that might have been power, or maybe just the satisfaction of taking control back from someone who thought I was too small, too unintelligent, too defeated to fight back. I whispered to myself in the parking garage, he'll never see me coming. Marcus's arrogance reached new heights over the following weeks. He bought Melanie a car, a red convertible that showed up on our credit card statement as a company expense. For business development, he explained when I questioned it. Melanie needs reliable transportation to meet with clients and suppliers. I nodded and recorded the purchase in my detailed spreadsheet. Every car payment, every insurance charge, every gallon of gas he paid for with our joint account. The documentation grew thicker every day. He started coming home later and later, sometimes not until 2 or 3 a.m. His excuses became lazier. Inventory check, website maintenance, strategic planning session. I never argued, never accused, just smiled and said I understood how demanding entrepreneurship could be. My compliance made him bolder. He stopped trying to hide things. Hotel charges appeared directly on our statements. Restaurant bills for 2 on nights he claimed to be working alone. Jewelry purchases that never made it home to me. One evening, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket for a weekend trip to wine country. 2 rooms at a luxury resort, couples massage, champagne dinner. I photographed it with steady hands and added it to my evidence file. Then I put it back in his pocket exactly where I'd found it. Marcus thought my silence meant ignorance. He had no idea I was building a case so thorough that even the best lawyer in the state couldn't defend him. Every purchase he made with our money was another nail in the coffin he was building for himself. 3 weeks after I submitted my investment proposal, Helena called. Your proposal was accepted, she said, barely containing her excitement. Congratulations, you're now the majority shareholder in a boutique luxury goods company. My heart pounded. They said yes. They were desperate. Your terms saved them from bankruptcy. The owner, Melanie Santos, was thrilled, said you were an angel investor. I almost laughed at the irony. Angel investor. When does the transfer finalize? Papers should be signed by end of week. You'll have controlling shares and a board seat if you want it, though as a silent partner you can remain anonymous. I want to stay anonymous, I confirmed. At least for now. That night Marcus came home excited. Amazing news, Melanie's company got a major investor. She's saved. He actually hugged me, spinning me around the kitchen like we were celebrating together. That's wonderful, I said, meaning every word. Yes. This investor is putting in enough capital to expand operations, hire staff, everything. Melanie's business is finally going to succeed. He poured champagne, oblivious to the fact that he was toasting my investment. My money, carefully saved and strategically deployed. My company now, my control. To new beginnings, Marcus said, raising his glass. To new beginnings, I echoed, clinking my glass against his. He had no idea that the anonymous investor who'd saved his mistress's company was his wife. The same wife he'd been stealing from and lying to for months. The same wife who now controlled Melanie's income, her career, her future. I was now, quite literally, Melanie's unseen boss, and she had absolutely no idea. Marcus's birthday party the following month was an elaborate affair. He'd always loved being the center of attention, and this year was no exception. 50 people filled our house, spilling onto the patio where I'd set up tables and catering. Melanie attended as a special guest. Marcus's words, not mine. She arrived wearing a dress I recognized from the boutique charges on our credit card, carrying a gift bag that probably came from her own failing inventory. I watched her navigate the party, touching Marcus's arm just a little too long, laughing at his jokes with practiced enthusiasm. Our guests noticed but said nothing, all of them complicit in the charade through their silence. When it was time for toasts, I stood and raised my glass. The party quieted, everyone turning to watch the wife honor her cheating husband. "To Marcus," I said, my voice clear and steady, "who has always been so generous with investments, so willing to support new ventures and believe in people's potential." I looked directly at Melanie. "To taking risks and hoping they pay off." The room cheered and drank. Marcus beamed. Melanie smiled nervously. No one understood the layers of meaning in my words. Only I knew that the champagne they were drinking, the catering they were enjoying, the entire party they were attending, all of it was paid for by my company. The same company that had just saved Melanie's business. The same company that now owned 51% of everything she'd built. I took a sip of champagne, meeting Melanie's eyes across the room, and smiled. She had no idea that her angel investor was standing right in front of her, wearing a patient smile and plotting her downfall. 2 months into my ownership of Melanie's luxury goods, I initiated an internal review for investors. It was standard business practice, examining company finances, checking inventory, reviewing expenses to ensure proper management. Helena helped me structure it professionally. "The investors want transparency," I explained to the accounting firm I'd hired. "A complete audit of the books." What the audit revealed was exactly what I'd expected. Missing invoices, unexplained expenses, unauthorized purchases charged to the company that had nothing to do with business operations. Melanie panicked. I received daily reports about her frantically trying to locate receipts and explain charges. She called emergency meetings with her small staff, demanded explanations for inventory discrepancies, and scrambled to present a clean financial picture to the mysterious investors. But the evidence was damning. Expensive dinners that matched dates Marcus had claimed to be helping with business. Hotel stays during supposed trade shows that never existed. Even the car Marcus had bought her appeared on the company books as a business asset. My husband's name kept appearing on unauthorized expense forms, sometimes as MW Holdings, sometimes as Consultant M. Winters, sometimes just as supplier payments that went to accounts he controlled. The audit documented everything. I sat in my home office, reviewing the reports, and felt a cold satisfaction. Marcus had committed fraud against Melanie's company. He'd been using her business as a front to funnel our money into their affair, disguising marital theft as business investment. The audit report landed on my desk with a satisfying thud. I forwarded it to Catherine, my lawyer. Her response came quickly. "This is gold. When you're ready to move, we move hard." The affair began to unravel on its own once the financial pressure mounted. Melanie confronted Marcus about the audit findings. I knew because I heard him on the phone in his study, his voice rising defensively. "I was helping you. Those expenses were necessary. They're calling them unauthorized. The investors are threatening to pull funding." "Then explain it to them. Tell them I was consulting." "You were never officially a consultant, Marcus. There's no contract, no documentation, nothing." Their relationship turned toxic fast. The same passion that had burned through our savings and mortgage now turned against them. They fought constantly. Melanie demanded Marcus help fix the financial mess. Marcus accused her of being ungrateful. The gossip reached my former workplace through Helena, who heard it from mutual business contacts. "Apparently Melanie's boyfriend or investor or whatever is making things difficult," someone told her. "The whole company's a mess." Helena reported this to me during our weekly coffee meetings, not knowing I was the source of all Melanie's problems. "Such a shame," I said, shaking my head sympathetically. "Poor woman." But I wasn't sympathetic, I was strategic. I watched the relationship implode through Marcus's increasingly stressed behavior. He snapped at me more, drank more, slept less. His perfect double life was collapsing, and he couldn't understand why. I said nothing, did nothing. Just watched as the consequences of his choices caught up with him. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people destroy themselves while you maintain perfect, innocent silence. The divorce papers were filed on a Tuesday morning. Catherine handled everything, serving Marcus at his office where he couldn't make a scene. The petition cited financial misconduct, fraud, and emotional abuse. Attached were 300 pages of evidence, every receipt, every forged signature, every unauthorized transfer, the text messages with Melanie, the hotel charges, the car purchase, the refinanced mortgage, all of it documented and notarized and submitted to the court. Marcus came home that evening pale and shaking. "Tess, we need to talk." "I don't think we do," I replied calmly. I was sitting in the living room, a glass of wine in hand, completely composed. "You had no right to." "I had every right," I interrupted. "You committed fraud, you stole from our joint accounts, you refinanced our house without my permission, you've been financing an extramarital affair with money we both earned." "I can explain." "I don't need your explanations, I have documentation." I pulled out my tablet, showing him the audit report from Melanie's company. Watching his face as he recognized his own name on the unauthorized expense forms was deeply satisfying. You own." He couldn't finish the sentence. "The company you've been funneling our money into? Yes, I'm the anonymous investor who saved Melanie's business, the same business where you've been committing fraud." Marcus collapsed onto the couch, the papers from the divorce petition scattered around him. "I don't understand." "How did you—" "I learned," I said simply. "While you were busy underestimating me, I was learning. You taught me that investments have risks, Marcus. You just never considered that you might be my riskiest investment." His face crumpled. "We can fix this. I'll make it right." "You can't fix this. It's already done." Marcus begged for 3 weeks straight. Phone calls, emails, texts, messages through friends and family. He showed up at my new apartment, rented with money from my secret account, multiple times until I threatened a restraining order. "Please, Tess, I made mistakes. I was stupid and selfish, but we can work through this." I let him talk during one of his unannounced visits, mainly because Catherine advised me to document his admissions for court. "I'm terrified of losing everything," he admitted, tears streaming down his face. "The house, my reputation, my business contacts. If the fraud charges stick, I could face criminal prosecution." "You should have thought of that before," I replied calmly. "But I love you, doesn't that mean anything?" I looked at this man I'd built a life with, this man who'd betrayed me so thoroughly and felt nothing but cold certainty. "You love what I represented, the stability, the support, the safety net. You didn't love me enough to stay faithful or honest." He tried a different approach, anger replacing tears. "You're vindictive, you planned all of this, you manipulated me." "I protected myself," I corrected. "There's a difference. You bought Melanie's company just to destroy us. I bought a failing business that my husband was illegally funneling money into. That's called a smart investment." Marcus's lawyer had advised him to settle. My documentation was too thorough, my evidence too damning. Fighting me in court would only lead to criminal charges and worse financial consequences. "Sign the papers," I said, sliding the settlement agreement across my kitchen table. "You keep your car and your personal accounts. Everything else is mine. No alimony, no claims to the house, no shared debt. Clean break." His hands shook as he picked up the pen. "You really planned this whole thing." "You taught me to think strategically about investments," I replied. "You just never considered that you might be my worst one." The corporate paperwork finalized the following week. Tess Morrison Holdings became the majority owner of Melanie's luxury goods, with all shares and assets officially transferred into my name. No more silent partner. I was now on record as the company owner. I scheduled a management meeting for the following Monday. Melanie would finally learn who her angel investor really was. She arrived at the meeting room Helena had helped me reserve, carrying a portfolio and wearing another outfit I recognized from our credit card statements. Her expression when she saw me was priceless. Confusion, recognition, then slowly dawning horror. "Tess." "Hello, Melanie, please sit down." She sat mechanically, her face going pale. "I don't understand, you're the investor." "I'm the majority shareholder. 51% of your company belongs to me, has for months now." Her hands gripped the edge of the table. "But how? Why?" "You know why." I slid the audit report across to her. "These are unauthorized expenses, company funds used for personal purposes, fraud essentially." Marcus said those were legitimate. "Marcus lied," I interrupted. "To you, to me, to everyone, and you helped him steal from our marriage to prop up a failing business." Melanie's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know you were married at first. When I found out, he said you were separated, that the divorce was almost final." Did you really believe that? Or did you just want to? Silence. I pulled out another document. This is a termination notice. Citing misuse of company funds and conflict of interest. Your employment ends today. You can't. I own 51% of this company. I absolutely can. I stood, gathering my papers. You're free to find other employment, Melanie, though I imagine explaining this situation to future employers might be challenging. She called after me as I left, her voice breaking. You own us, the whole company. I paused at the door, looking back at her. I own the majority shares. Which means I control everything. The inventory you picked, the website you designed, the business model you developed, all of it answers to me now. This is revenge, she whispered. This is business, I corrected. You and Marcus gambled with other people's money. I'm simply collecting on a bad investment. I walked out of that conference room feeling lighter than I had in months. Behind me, I heard Melanie crying, probably calling Marcus, desperately trying to understand how her angel investor had become her executioner. But I didn't look back. I had more important things to do. The news spread through the local business community within days. Melanie Santos had been fired from her own company for financial misconduct. The details were vague enough to protect me legally, but damning enough to destroy her professionally. Helena called me, her voice tinged with shock and admiration. Tess, I just heard. That company you invested in, you fired the founder. For cause, I confirmed. The audit revealed significant financial irregularities. But that's the woman who was. She trailed off, piecing it together. Yes, my husband's mistress, the one he was funding with our savings. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, you're terrifying. I'm thorough, I corrected. But Melanie's firing was just the beginning of her problems. Other business owners in the boutique luxury space heard about the financial misconduct. In a small industry where reputation was everything, rumors spread fast. Melanie applied to 3 different companies for management positions. All 3 rejected her after calling references and hearing about the fraud allegations. She tried to start a new venture, setting up a website and social media presence. But former clients and suppliers who'd been burned by her company's financial troubles warned others away. Within 2 months, Melanie was essentially blacklisted in the luxury goods industry. She'd have to completely change careers or move to a different city to escape the reputation she'd built. I heard about her struggles through the same gossip channels that had once spread news of her affair with Marcus. But unlike when I'd been the humiliated wife, I felt no sympathy now. She'd made choices that had hurt me, damaged my marriage, and cost me financially. Now she was living with the consequences of those choices, just like Marcus was about to. The final divorce settlement was approved by the court in November, 6 months after I'd filed the initial papers. Marcus retained his personal checking account, which contained approximately $3,000, his car, which was worth less than he owed on it, and his business contacts, many of whom had distanced themselves after learning about the fraud and affair. Everything else became mine. The house went to me, with Marcus ordered to vacate within 30 days. Our joint savings accounts, what little remained after his spending spree, were divided with me receiving 80% as compensation for his fraud. The refinanced mortgage, also my responsibility, but the judge ordered Marcus to pay half the monthly payments for 3 years as restitution. His credit was ruined. The refinancing, the debt, the fraud allegations, all of it tanked his credit score to the point where he couldn't even rent a decent apartment. He ended up in a month-to-month situation in a rough part of town, driving a car that broke down twice in the first month he had it. I saw him once outside the courthouse after the final hearing. He stood on the steps, looking smaller than I remembered. Thinner, older, defeated. Our eyes met briefly. I didn't gloat or sneer or show any satisfaction. I simply walked past him, carrying my briefcase full of signed documents that proved I'd won. He'd gambled our entire life on an affair he thought would fulfill him, and he'd lost everything in the process. I'd been the collateral damage he'd expected to sweep aside. Instead, I'd become the architect of his downfall. As I drove away from the courthouse, I didn't look back. That chapter of my life was closed, sealed, finished. Now I had a company to run. 1 year after my credit card declined at the grocery store, I stood in my new office overlooking the city. The view was spectacular, all glass and steel and possibility. Melanie's luxury goods had been rebranded as Morrison & Co., a boutique investment firm specializing in luxury goods consulting. I'd hired a new team, restructured the business model, and turned a failing retail operation into a profitable consulting service. The office suite took up the entire top floor of a downtown building. My name was on the door. My vision drove the company. My decisions shaped its future. Everything I'd lost, my savings, my security, my sense of self, I'd rebuilt stronger than before. My phone buzzed with a message request from Marcus. I stared at his name on the screen for a long moment. Part of me was curious what he could possibly have to say after everything that had happened. The stronger, wiser part of me knew that curiosity was a trap. Whatever he wanted, forgiveness, closure, another chance, didn't matter anymore. He wasn't part of my story, just a chapter I'd closed and learned from. I deleted the message request without opening it. Then I blocked his number permanently. My assistant knocked on the door. "Ms. Morrison, the investors are here for the quarterly meeting." I straightened my blazer, grabbed my presentation folder, and headed to the conference room. The quarterly meeting where I'd present our growth numbers, our expansion plans, our success story. As I walked through my office, past my team working at their desks, past the framed photo of our first major client signing, I thought about Marcus's final text that I'd never read. Whatever he'd wanted to say didn't matter. His words couldn't touch me anymore. That evening, as the sun set over the city and my office emptied out, I stood at the window thinking about the journey from that parking lot where I'd cried to this office where I commanded. I whispered to my reflection in the darkening glass, the same way I used to whisper to myself in vulnerable moments. He spent our savings chasing luxury and trying to impress someone who used him. I built an empire with the leftovers, the scraps he thought were worthless. And then I smiled, gathered my things, and went home to the life I'd built on my own terms. Not despite his betrayal, not to prove anything to him. Just because I'd learned that the best revenge isn't destruction, it's transformation. Marcus had tried to make me small, dependent, powerless. Instead, he'd forged me into someone stronger than I'd ever been. Someone who knew her worth and refused to settle for less. Someone who could turn betrayal into business success and pain into power. The woman who'd cried in her car over a declined credit card was gone. In her place stood the CEO of a thriving company, a woman who'd learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing you ever do for yourself. I'd lost a cheating husband and a false sense of security. I'd gained a company, confidence, and complete control of my future. In the end, Marcus had done me a favor. He'd shown me exactly who he was, and I'd shown him exactly who I could become.